This has been on my mind for the longest time. Why were Sega and Nintendo rivals? Because they both, for a while, had the leading hardware? Oh, maybe. But there seems to be a pretty pathetic reason for a company rivalry. I mean, look at today, Nintendo, Sony and Microsoft all cater for different audiences, but yet, because they all sell hardware, that makes them all company rivals? Nah, that's too convenient for an excuse. I don't believe that for 1 second. Sorry to break it to you, but the reason why this console war crap even started in the first place was the media stirring up hype to get the best of each side to the maximum sale possibility. And it worked. But other than hardware, these companies have nothing in common. Which brings me to my topic. Nintendo wasn't the rival to Sega. Everything about what they did, who they made games for, and their stance in the industry was too far apart. That isn't a rivalry. Sony wanted the same thing as Sega in terms of a long-term goal, but other than that, nothing again. They both had different strategies and ways of pursuing a profit. I know I'm not making this very clear, so let me tell it like this. The definition for a rival is a person or thing competing with another for the same objective or for superiority in the same field of activity. I can see how people thought this was related to Nintendo and Sega. They both make games, they both made hardware, but they didn't compete for the same reason. And the reason why they both did so well was because they stayed the hell away from each other. Nintendo had way more family-friendly stuff, and that's been their strategy ever since day one. Sega suits the more extreme side of things, more adult if it were. If you compare what Sega made that was very family-friendly, it's not even a fraction to what they did overall. Sure, they dipped their toes into the same pool a couple of times, but overall, Sega is nothing like Nintendo. They weren't reaching for the same objective. And they did not certainly play in the same field of the industry. By the way, I'm not done here. The verb definition for rival is be or seem to be equal or comparable to. I'm not going to rub this in your face any longer, but I think you can get the gist of what I'm talking about. However, that's not to say Sega didn't have a rival. They most certainly did. And it's been under our noses for years. And I'm not the only one to notice their similarities. Sega's company rival is... I'm not just going to expect you to believe me. Of course, I'm going to try and back my claim with some evidence. And here it is. Everything Sega and Capcom do, and have done, makes them more better rivals for each other than any other company. Both companies in their early days both still had a great foothold in the arcade market. So much so that when the home console started to rise, they both began creating ports for the 8-bit systems. But of course that's not the only thing they had in common. If you'll listen to a little list I have that could be considered to some very outrageous similarities. Sonic and Megaman. They are both mascots representing their companies. They are both blue, they both fight robotic enemies, and they both have the main villains as evil scientists. And both franchises have incredible music. I'd say the best music that the classic era has to offer is through these two franchises. And even though both franchises have seen better days, they are still remembered really fondly after all this time. I mean, it might seem like a bit of a coincidence, but considering the history, it seems too much of a coincidence. I have more. Street Fighter and Virtua Fighter. When Street Fighter was created, it set a standard for fighting games from that point on. So much so that many companies have tried to recreate their own formula for easy success. but of course originality is the one way to stay on top, with the exception of games like Mortal Kombat and Killer Instinct. Virtua Fighter has the same story. When created, it was the first 3D fighting game. It also set the standard for future 3D fighters. And again, many tried to create their own formula with the 3D fighters. However, again, only a small fraction managed to retain their own image like Tekken or Dead or Alive. However, these two masterpieces were the ones to sprout their new ages of games. So both of these pieces were very clearly inspirational to developers. But it's also clear that they took inspiration from each other. Ryu and Akira look almost identical, and so do many other characters from the roster. It would be no surprise at all if they took ideas from each other. It's far too close to be a coincidence. Do you need more convincing? Alright then. Shinobi and Strider, both are Eastern-styled warriors who fight robots and military foot soldiers using advanced weaponry and techniques. Streets of Rage and Final Fight both have you playing as urban heroes with amazing strength and sense of justice, walking through the city, smashing the hell out of criminal gang members. Hold on, I've got more. Golden Axe and Red Earth, both of these games set in the Conan the Barbarian styled-like planet, fighting beasts and other barbaric humans. Also, these two games started as very popular arcade machines, Space Harrier and Forgotten Worlds. One is more 3D than the other one, but come on, both characters are flying through the air shooting bad guys with a huge gun-like laser that takes 2 hands to lift. Started to see what I'm talking about? I've got a couple more. House of the Dead and Resident Evil. Now I know this one's a bit of a stretch. They don't follow the same conventions as one another. One is survival horror and one is an action rail shooter. But they both roughly came out at the same time, and you cannot deny this similarity.
The House of the Dead. Resident Evil.
Devil May Cry and Bayonetta. I know they both came out worlds apart, and DMC is a much older franchise by far. But come on, look at them both! You can't tell me the folks at Platinum and Sega didn't take a little inspiration from DMC and tried to create their own identity with Bayonetta. It worked, don't get me wrong, but for crying out loud, with all of this evidence being pushed forward, you must see what I am seeing. But I want to make something very clear. Rivalry does not equal an enemy. You can be somebody's rival and be in good sport about it, no problem at all. And that's what I see with Sega and Capcom. Not once have I seen any hectic business plans or comparing products to make the opposing company look weak. In fact, if you want to see some proof that Sega and Capcom get along, then look. Not too long ago, the comic book series was released and is still going, called Worlds Unite. And yep, you guessed it, it has video game characters from both their companies in the same comic, fighting or working together. Now tell me, if two companies had a huge problem with each other, would they work together like this in such a media as huge as comic books? No. It's clear as tensions go, these two companies do not have any. In the future, I would like to see these two companies work together on more projects. Could you imagine what they could create? What about Sega vs Capcom fighting game? I know somebody else already thought of it. Where the hell did you think I get this graphic from? Or a crossover game involving Megaman and Sonic, just like the comic books. That would be so freaking awesome. The whole point of this video was to debunk the past media of Nintendo vs Sega because it's just not relevant anymore. And in fact, I dare say it was never relevant. If the media hadn't pushed the hype so much, it would have never been a thing. All speculation aside, Sega and Capcom are the true rivals for each other. And Nintendo vs Sega, that, again, was just media hype for sales purposes. Anything can be done like that. I mean, Sony versus Microsoft, come on, if both clearly have different goals, both clearly have different ideals of audience, and yet people compare them and rage about it. It doesn't make any sense. But I know this does. Sega and Capcom. You guys are awesome. Working against or with each other, keep it up. You guys are awesome. thank you for watching this video. And if you like this, then watch another one, because I have enough. I've made 10 others. Watch them, please. And I will give some shout-outs because I'm insecure in my own body. Skinny Mini, Poor Man's Gourmet Kitchen, and Casually Gaming. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.